So we're here today to talk to Luke to answer a few questions around the process heat device resource consenting issues, which have arisen from a recent webinar which Dita did. Thank you, Luke, for your time this afternoon. I'm just going to run through these. These are typical of what people have raised off the back of that webinar. One of the things we get asked quite often by our clients is, are companies actually progressing with this?
Yeah, they definitely are. We've already done a couple already. We've got 3 or 4 underway, and we've got another 20 or so sites we're already talking to about it. People are taking this seriously. They're aware that there's a January 2025 deadline, and they don't want to be right up against that. They want to be proactive, get the ducks in a row, and get this all wrapped up.
So I think there was some chat around the possibility of this getting repealed. Is that reality, do you think?
From our perspective, we haven't heard anything. Look, the coalition government has been quite clear about some changes to the Resource Management Act, but as far as we're aware, there's been no specific notes around this specific piece of legislation within that. And to be fair, we're going to keep our ear to the ground, talk to ECA and the councils regularly, and if we hear anything, we'll make sure we communicate it out to our clients.
Good. One of the things that people have heard a lot about is an SQP. When do we need those?
Yeah, so an SQP, or suitably qualified person, is required from the legislation for sites producing more than 2,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per year. Now, for those sites, that SQP needs to sign off and approve any plan developed before it goes to the council. That's not to say that sites below 2,000 tonnes don't need a plan or go through a review process. But what we recommend is sites between 500 to 2,000 still actually use a decarbonisation expert, such as Dita. We find that clients get a lot of value out of this, and the fact that oftentimes they don't have that experience in-house because it's not a skill you need day to day. So 500 to 2,000, you don't need an SQP, but we highly recommend it. 2,000 and above, you're required by law to have one.
Right. So the SQP is something that the client needs to find. It's not something that, for instance, the local council would provide into you to do that review. Is that right?
So local councils will have available SQPs in your area, but you go out and find someone to engage to do that. You directly engage them rather than the council engaging them.
Right, I see. Yeah. If I don't need to engage an SQP, so I'm in that particular range you mentioned there, what are the real benefits of me doing that?
Yeah, I mean, engaging someone like Dita to support you in this means you're engaging someone who does this day to day. We know the technologies, we know the industries, and we know what councils are after, right? So the plans we develop are going to be to the level and to the standard that the councils are after. It means you have a pretty smooth compliance process. What we've heard from councils is that some people are submitting plans that aren't quite in line with the standards they expect, and they have to go back and forth and
so there could be extra work there.
Exactly. Like it ends up being a long drawn out process, which is not what we're after, and I'm sure not what our clients are after either. In terms of an SQP, so we've had a few questions about, hey, there's actually not that many listed on the CEP website, etc. It's interesting to know that CEP is actually rolling out their formal accreditation process now, which is great. It's a pretty intensive process. There's an interview, you review previous work, you do an exam. And so it's going to be a pretty high quality of what an SQP is in the marketplace. As I'm sure people are aware, we've got a pretty big team of decarb experts, which is awesome. We're sending 3 of our most senior engineers through the process to begin with, get a feel for kind of what the level of experience needs to be, and then kind of expand to the rest of the team as required. So those 3 experts are spread from all our offices, Tauranga, Wellington and Christchurch. And yeah, we'll kind of see how that goes.
So there are very few at the moment. Is that a barrier for people getting this work done, for example?
Yeah, at the moment we've talked a lot to councils about the fact that, look, the CEP process wasn't set up until a couple of weeks ago. So we're qualifying people as SQPs under, effectively, they've got 10, 15 years experience, they've got a good background of industrial decarb, and to date that's had really good reception from the council, and we'll continue with that until such a time that accreditation is widely available.
And now this is obviously a compliance issue first and foremost. Is there actually greater value outside of the simple compliance here?
Yeah, I mean, the key part of these emissions reduction plans is a plan to go where you are now to decarbonise your company. within reason, obviously. Now, the cool thing about that is a key part of businesses' strategies for a couple of years, right? It's great for exporters. Exporting to Europe is going to require that more and more. You have pressure from consumers, but the real thing that's come up in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, is around gas pricing.
Yes.
So a lot of people would have seen in the news that gas availability is decreasing pretty significantly. We're seeing it in energy news pretty regularly. I think I saw something last week from Vegetables New Zealand. Ellery from one of the energy engineers was talking about, hey, some of the growers are being told, look, you can have a 6-month contract, you can have a year contract, or you might not have gas altogether, which is a pretty challenging situation to be in, I can imagine. And that combined with, we're seeing pretty big increases on the spot market, overall short contracts. Look, an emissions reduction plan is also a gas reduction plan oftentimes, so.
Because that's the lead element here, isn't it? Is that the first and foremost measure is to reduce consumption, is that?
Yeah, we're always, look, one of the key parts of our business is efficiency first. Make good projects, good savings, make your process work better with what you already have. Once you've got that under control, we call that look at the demand side, tick that box, get that running smoothly, then we look at the supply side, which is something like a fuel switch. And that's the same approach we take to our emission reduction plans.
And that's what the councils are expecting from this, is that there would be both elements covered in these plans.
100%, yeah. So one of the key requirements of these emission reduction plans is an audit. An audit basically looks at how you're running, how you could run better. And then off the back of that, you then look at the big asset, what could you do with your boiler or your dryer or something like that.
A particular concern is that these plans, one has to adhere to them, yes, and this is part of a consenting process. One is committing to deliver what is in this plan. So how do we guard against making those plans too grand?
Well, one of the key things we do as decarb experts in our role as SQPs, or just generally to support you in these plans, is we use our experience for a number of years to make sure whatever we recommend to put in that plan makes sense for you economically. So it's got to stack up. It's got to make technological sense. So it's actually got to be technology that works and is proven. And 3, it's actually just got to work for your site's special conditions, right? Like, where's it going to go? Does it fit within your other compliance activities? All those other things that go into making these projects work.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all. This is quite bespoke to the site.
Exactly. We're not going to go spend 2 minutes walking around site and say you can need an electric boiler there, heat recovery there, and leave site for the day and write a big plan up that says you need to spend $10 million. It's not what we're here for.
Great.
We're here to make sure whatever plan we develop is in partnership with you, meets the requirements of the council, and make sure everyone's happy at the end of the day.
And who's this affecting?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're finding predominantly it's affecting sites with natural gas boilers in the North Island. Predominantly that's because these boilers previously didn't need resource consent to operate. They were under kind of a permitted activity, but because they now produce over 500 tonnes of CO2, they now need a consent. In the South Island, it's predominantly LPG or diesel boilers. Most coal boilers are already covered under this legislation because they already have air discharge consents because of the fact they release particulates or nitrogen dioxide, etc.
So with this being a new requirement, is it quite possible that people have missed this, that this is coming for them and they were not expecting this?
Yeah, I definitely think so. We've talked to a lot of clients who were their first introduction to some of this stuff, which is challenging, right? Like the deadline for an existing boiler is Jan 2025, which is 6-7 months away. Not a lot of time to get up to speed with this, pull together a plan, get to the council, etc. So we're encouraging people to start moving on this, or at least start thinking about it pretty seriously about how it's going to impact their site.
You mentioned that the timescales are really tight on this for the start of next year in terms of having a plan. Just to be clear, you don't need actually to have executed this plan by that, is that fair?
Yeah, the plans effectively go for the length of the consent. So for existing boilers, that consent can run for a maximum of 10 years. For new boilers, it's 20 years. But what we find is the conditions will have different milestones at different points. So in the first year, you might say you're doing X. 4 years later you think you're doing Y. So it kind of builds that up over the course of the consent.
Right, so one doesn't have to deliver all of this in a very short time scale, which could be complex projects, possibly large capex. There's actually time to put this in as a real part of your business planning for the long term, yes?
100%. That's the best way we like to do things, is make sure they fit within the project business flow and aligns with previous replacement plans.